so exciting to see everyone. Oh, I love a buzzy full house. My name is Anne, and I am the president of the AIGA New York chapter. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I want to thank you for joining us for another special AIGA New York Design Spotlight event. These events feature designers sharing top-of-mind work or breakout work. And we are in for an incredible treat tonight. We are truly grateful to be here with our AIGA New York community, as well as a few of our board members in the audience. First of a couple of announcements. Before we want to begin, a big thanks to Parsons for donating this beautiful space to bring us together, and to the Brooklyn Brewery for their support in our after reception. I also want to thank you all for coming and joining us today. By attending this talk and purchasing a ticket, your presence is a present. You are supporting our AIGA New York design community through the sharing of ideas and inspiration and helping to fund future events and initiatives. AIGA New York is a nonprofit organization with a volunteer board, so tonight, with all of you joining us here, you're already making an impact on strengthening our ability to do more and continuing to be a design resource, and we are grateful. We also have some great events coming up. We have in-person and virtual events, so please be sure to visit our website, aiganewyork.org, for more information. And lastly, we invite you to join us for a book signing reception following the event. We have some good news because we know we sent out some emails earlier. We have physical books available for purchase, and attendees have also received an email offering a 20% discount if you buy the book online. We'll provide you with a book plate for our speakers to sign and personalize. If you pre-purchased a book, we have secured those books, and you'll be able to pick them up when you check in. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's panel. So first, joining us tonight is Stephen Heller, author and co-author of over 200 books on design, illustration, and popular culture. He is a recipient of the AIGA Medal and the National Design Award for Design Mind. Next, oh yes, clap. Honestly, we have a stacked panel today, so we're just going to keep the claps going. Next, we have Mirko Ilić. Mirko is a designer, illustrator, and activist based in New York. He organizes and curates shows and lectures around the world. He is the co-author of more than 10 books, including The Design of Dissent, co-authored with Milton Glaser. So let's give him a clip. Next, we have Beth Kleber. Beth is the founding archivist of the Milton Glaser Design Study Center and Archives at the School of Visual Arts, where she also lectures on design history and research and assists visiting researchers. She is curator and co-curator of several design exhibitions, and her essays have appeared in design anthologies, print magazine, and the Container List blog. Yay. And rounding out these incredible speakers is tonight's moderator, Angelina Lippert. Angelina is the chief curator and director of content of Poster House in New York City, the first museum in the United States dedicated to the art and history of the poster. She is the author of the Art Deco poster, and she was a recipient of the Emily Hall Tremaine Journalism Fellowship for Curators, and has written for the Muse by the Clio Awards as well as the New York Journal of Books. So thank you to our speakers for joining us tonight, and I will welcome them to the stage.
Whoever can guess what's in this bag gets it.
I was going to ask if it's bigger than the bread box, but not. Hi, everyone. Who has the book? Who's buying the book after? It's pretty split. That's great. So I'm very happy to have gotten the book in advance, which is wonderful. And I loved looking at it. I thought that there were so many images that were really unfamiliar to me, which as I did a show at Poster House on Pushpin Studios, so I thought I knew most of what Milton had done. So this was a great treat when it came in the mail. And I figured I'd start the evening with the question, what was your first memory of when you met Milton?
Well, since I'm the oldest, my first memory was going to Pushpin Studios to meet Milton and Seymour, Seymour Quast, the co-founder with Milton of Pushpin. And I was going there to have my pornographic magazine, Screw, redesigned. And Milton had designed an entire format. There were many different pages, possibilities shown, some that Seymour did, some that Milton did. But we glommed onto what Milton did because he made a pornographic magazine look like an annual report for some Fortune 500 company. And the logo that he did, which everybody but me liked, says in a Helvetica-ish typeface in caps, "Screw," with the middle of the E turned upward. Picture that. That was the first time we exchanged words, and I would remind him of that often.
What about you, Beth?
I first met Milton, it was in the early 2000s when I was brought on to start the Glaser archives at SVA, and at the time there was no archives of any sort, and Milton had made this agreement with SVA to donate his work. And it was a pretty intimidating assignment, and I remember going to his studio on 32nd Street and going with him to the top floor of the building where Mirko had his studio also, and just seeing these rows and rows of flat files and drawers. And Milton was very much behind the project, but he also had a lot of ambivalence and sort of, to me, comical ideas about his earlier work, and would just sort of pull things out of drawers and often want to throw things away. Which was a very terrifying prospect. So there was a lot of kind of like fishing things, not exactly out of the garbage, but sort of. But it was a process. So, but it was an incredible experience, particularly as an archivist. You're usually dealing with the work from someone who has passed away, or it's come to you from their family, and the opportunity to just spend all that time with a living artist, let alone someone like Milton Glaser, who, was so articulate about his work and was such an engaging, person just to talk with, to sort of get all that insight from the creators. It was a very unique experience and just like formed the basis for everything that I've done since then.
Actually, before I pass the question back to Mirko, I want to know more about how did the archive at SVA get built from what Milton had? Did you just take everything, or was there like an editing process that he participated in?
Yeah, so I went through a lot of it with him. And in some cases, he wanted to, as I mentioned, wanted to get rid of stuff, and I said, no, we need to keep it. And then in some cases, I was just working on my own, and then eventually he would look at it himself as he was deciding what he wanted to donate to the college. And at that time, a certain amount of work actually was left at the studio because it was stuff he needed to refer to for whatever reason, or maybe it would be exhibited later. But much later, actually just a few years ago, as Milton was moving out of his building, a lot of that work actually ended up coming to us after all.
Wow. All right, Mirko, now you can tell me the first time you met Milton.
Sounds dramatic.
It might be.
I think it was in 1976. Was in dorm room of student dorm in Belgrade. Was late night, and a friend of mine gave me a book of Milton Glaser. That was first time in my life I saw designer / illustrator having his own book. And I don't believe anybody, Steve can correct me, I don't believe anybody before him had book. Only fine artists, whatever. And book was, at that time in communist country, Yugoslavia was that, foreign book was very expensive thing. And my only way to have something of that book is to flip enough time to remember every image. And I flipped through that book pretty much all night long. Sounds like very pervert, but it is. And that's how I met Milton. And when I came in this country, one of the first people who I met actually was Steve, but almost immediately after Steve, I went to Milton because I wanted to meet the guy behind the book. And I must tell you something, Milton comes across to everybody slightly differently, but he was extremely generous. Mm-hmm. I wanted to figure out, like I always wanted to know how much someone is true to his work and whatever. And at the same time, he wanted to flip through my work. And because I needed to bring like portfolio. And I was bored with that. And he was going very carefully through everything. And I was like, come on, stop, let's talk. And after he finished everything, he asked me, and if you get the job, where are you staying? I said, with friend, whatever. And if you get the job, where are you gonna work? And I'm like, I'm East European, I can work in the rain, in a park, you know, like. And he said, just in case if you get some job and you don't have place to work, I always have table in my studio. You can come anytime and use table. We started working together on different projects, we became friends. And then in approximately 1993, I mentioned to him, Milton, you remember you offered me once table? But that time Milton was knowing me already very well. He moved back and said, yeah, what do you want? And I said, can I have floor? And that's how I end up on top floor.
I see.
And by the way, just to let you know, just imagine, because you wanted them to visualize logo, my floor was Milton's ceiling.
Did you bang on the floor a lot? No. Okay.
No need.
Oh.
He asked me later if it was a good idea.
And?
We'll let that be.
No, oh no.
So all of you have worked with Milton in a variety of different ways, either as an archivist and friends and collaborators. And I obviously want to talk to you about, like, in what ways did you interact with Milton professionally? But as an addendum to that, I'd love to actually hear your favorite professional Milton story.
I'm the oldest. I'll go first. My favorite story was after he designed the Screw magazine and sent over the layouts. I went over them with the tissue paper and marked everything that I thought was crap. I didn't like light line Gothic. I didn't like the fact that there was just one column on the right side. I mean, we're talking about classy porn. And they sent back the layouts to Milton, and he called up the publisher, and they let me get on the extension phone and listen to Milton say, "Who is this wise-ass fuck?" And that was my most memorable moment, which I reminded him of often. But that all said, that he became a close part of my teaching life and writing life add up to a lot more than bad layouts for a porn paper.
This is not, it's funny, this is a memory that I have that didn't actually, it involved me, but I was not present. So as part of my job, we host a lot of visitors and students and writers, and we had a class coming from a university in England. And this has happened more than once where a class, particularly from abroad, would not pay close attention to where they were supposed to go, and they would sometimes go to Milton's studio on 32nd Street instead of coming to SVA. So I remember one time this entire class showed up at his 32nd Street studio when they were actually supposed to come to me at SVA on 2nd Avenue, 22nd Street. They rang the bell, and Milton just let them up, and they had a lovely chat, and he talked to the students. I mean, completely unexpected. He was not, he had no reason to know that they were going to come, but he was generous with his time. He spoke to students all the time, but just that this, random group of students from England show up at his doorstep, and he took them in, and then eventually they moseyed on down 10 blocks, like an hour later. And the teacher was so moved by this experience, she had actually started crying. And it was like an incredible experience for her as a teacher and a designer. Anyway, so to me, that sort of typifies his generosity with students and sort of openness to talk about design with anyone.
Could I just piggyback on that? Because it reminded me of an event that was also very moving and showed Milton's generosity. My parents in their early 90s were losing it. And one day I get a call from Dan, Milton's assistant, saying, "Your parents are here." Now, my parents didn't know Milton Glaser. I'm not even sure they knew who Milton Glaser was. But they ended up in his studio. And Milton spent an hour with them trying to explain what I did for a living. And they left. I didn't have to go down or go up and pick them up. But I just thought that was one of the more amazing encounters.
Did your parents finally figure out what you do for a living?
No.
You forgot to mention you called me to run downstairs and make damage control.
We have a network.
What about you?
I spent so much time with Milton and different stories, but I think cute story is I got to do show in Ljubljana. I decided to do tolerance poster show and ask 23 different artists to create poster and to start all of that. But I had really limited amount of time, and I wanted top artists. And I went downstairs to Milton, and I told him, I need tolerance poster from you in 2 days, because I want to put your poster with email when I invite other 22 people and ask them to do poster, and Milton already did it, kind of. And Milton was, oh, I'm going to be bait.
Yeah.
I said, exactly, and he actually did it in 2 days, and we got all other 22 artists doing posters immediately, and I'm talking top prima donnas of art world doing, because Milton already did.
Well, if it's good enough for Milton.
Yeah, and then I continue abusing him. Even he was older gentleman already, and it was not fair. When I finally established a non-profit, then I told him, "You remember poster?" And of course, he's knowing me. He went, "Yeah, what?" And I said, "I need logo for company," and he in no time did logo, and that is probably one of the last logos he did.
Which logo?
Tolerance
the
Project
Tolerance
logo.
You had that story before where you were going through the book that had all of Milton's work in it, and that really impacted you. Did a particular aspect of Milton's work or something about Milton's work change the way you approached graphic design?
To be honest, I didn't know much about this graphic design.
And yet.
Because in East Europe, you're artist, the end of the story. And you do set, you do poster, you do illustration, you do whatever artists do. By the way, in East Europe, we never did sketches, too, because artists know what this artist is doing. You don't ask him to show you sketches and roughs and whatever. But that's another story. It's communism. It's awful. Anyway, what I was I get really easily bored with my own work, and I always decide to entertain myself in first place and to change work and do something different. And Milton was perfect example of that for me. You go in the morning and you have no idea what you're going to do, in which kind of style, and you can do whatever you want. And that is what is totally was fascinating always with Milton, because I even saw him many times working, and pretty much even when he was at the table, he didn't know what he was going to come out of that. And he will change in a process style. He will change in a process idea, and he just let it go. And I have Sue as a witness here, which worked for many years with Milton. Milton didn't care in positive way. He didn't care if it's that job for no money, if it's that $1 million job, or whatever. He will just do with this and say, oh, that's that. Next. And there was something so beautiful about that. And I felt that in his book even before I met him.
But you were the one that let him know that it would be a good idea for him to do the poster for Mad Men. After Milton said, I don't want to do any more of that psychedelic 60s stuff, Mirko said, they probably have a lot of money.
It was not that kind of story. I have Sue. Sue is my witness. Hi, Sue. That was funny, actually. So I got call from Milton's studio, like, come down, come down. And I will always run up and down. And they told me, you will not believe Milton just refused doing Mad Men poster. And everybody was in shock and whatever. Turned out, of course, Milton didn't have idea what is Mad Men. He just didn't care. And they didn't know how to convince him to do it. And you can correct me, because I like to lie when I'm bored, and I'm getting to be bored and with myself. And
let him flow with it.
Yeah, and I told to Sue, take few of his old drawings, what they was suggesting, put in the layout. When he come in the morning, ask him what you think about something like this. Correct?
Something like that.
Yes, thank you. 30%. Anyway, and Milton showed up in the morning. Sue showed him, and Milton looked at it and said, no, you don't do that way. Move this, and he started designing poster without even remembering. He said no. Because he was just challenged. That's that. He was just challenged. He didn't care lots of money. He didn't care whatever. He just...
But there was lots of money.
We didn't tell him that. We kept most. Find their fee.
With all of the books that have been put out on Milton's work, including many books he put out himself, why this book and why now? Like, why put this part of his career under a microscope?
This was the part of his career that he wanted to disassociate himself from. It had been chronicled, it had been praised. It included aspects of his work that he continued to use, which is why the organization of the book is based on tropes rather than on chronology. But he was considered the overground spokesperson of the younger generation through those outline cellotact drawings that had a psychedelic air to them. And when it was discussed with him about doing something regarding this work, he was not in favor of it. So we had to wait till he died.
Yes.
My story is better than yours. Because
We'll let the audience.
Because I lie.
Yeah.
He was always avoiding certain work, because I think after he left Beatles, he didn't want to perform those songs anymore. That was He was creating his own new albums. And turned out he even didn't have those things in archive. He pretty much either didn't collect them or threw them away. And I started to collect them because of that book from student dorm. And I will sometimes show him, and he will go, oh, why you need that? And many years later, when he was doing his poster book, he needed to borrow posters from me because he didn't have them. And I was telling him that he needed to control a little bit that narrative, and it's important to include work, and I was trying to be clever. Doesn't work with Milton because he's always more clever than you are. Anyway, and I told him, if you don't do that, one day somebody gonna do book. And he was...
And he turned to the camera and said, us.
No, he actually said, who gonna do it? And I said, I gonna do it. And he started to laugh. So, who is laughing now? Thank you.
He did hang on to a lot of that work, but he was very sort of careless about it. Like it was not so meaningful to him anymore. So a lot of it was in the basement of his building, in drawers, and there was like rooms and back of rooms. It was quite a warren down there, dark and dusty. And I remember being down there and finding old issues of the Pushpin Graphic, or some of the posters from the '60s that are in this book, and of which maybe he had one copy. It was, as Mirko said, he was, and Steve said, he was eager to leave that period behind, but he hadn't discarded it entirely, but he had definitely put it away.
No, I love how self-critical he was, because you mentioned the poster book that he put out, and I love in the back is all the stuff he didn't like. He's like, here's my worst stuff.
There is more of that.
There's more?
He didn't put everything what he didn't like. That is what he didn't like. What he really, really didn't like didn't appear in that part. Somewhere here is Chow, who is now my assistant and was Milton's assistant. And he was with Milton when Milton was throwing things away. And they was kind of like his assistants that was going through whatever he threw away just in case. Because Milton would go, And in one point of time, Chow is opening envelope and say, what is that? And it was the original sketch for Dylan poster. Milton went, and got saved from garbage.
God bless assistants.
Yes.
So wait, that's actually the bigger question. Do you think that Milton would have liked this book?
I have my doubts. I think what we've done with this book, Mirko's dogged collecting. I mean, every day he would send Beth and I another email. I found another thing that Milton would have thrown out. And there was just so much out there that he had forgotten about. And I think, at some point somebody's going to write a biography of Milton. And it's going to be full of information and stories that haven't been talked about or shared. And there will be work in there that goes against his grain. But now, his work belongs to everybody. But I think he would, and probably is, Mirko was looking up, so I think that's where he was looking down from. And he was tall.
He was very tall.
He would probably say, Jesus, I did that much stuff?
In the handful of years since Milton has passed, have you seen how people, whether students, design historians, fellow graphic designers, have you seen the way that people talk about his work shift at all? Is there this now newfound hallowed reverence, or is it being reassessed in any way?
I think that, Milton was in no way under-recognized or underappreciated during his career. But despite that, I was taken aback by sort of the outpouring of, emotion, but also just, respect and, adoration for his work after he passed away. I think that, I'm not sure people are necessarily reevaluating his work, but they're maybe thinking more about, I don't know, how they relate to it, what it means to them in their own practice, and his, greater impact, on how we communicate and what we see. Now, particularly now that, hopefully, this book also just sort of fills out the whole picture of, his cultural impact, throughout his entire career.
I said in the text and elsewhere that he and Seymour Quast were the Lennon and McCartney of graphic art. And in fact, they helped define the era, which is the subtitle of the show we're putting on in mid-May at the School of Visual Arts. I think that the community that we're in has always appreciated him, and you could see that anytime he was asked to speak or had an event of any kind. But there's a larger community that is reevaluating in a sense. Adam Gopnik's piece in The New Yorker kind of did that. Everybody thinks it was a review of our book, but I think it was a piece about Milton that happened to come out at the same time as our book. And I think he was making a case just as Gopnik made a case for Crazy Cat and Winsor McKay later on, that comic artists, commercial artists, illustrators have that cultural significance and cultural value.
Except for City of New York and logo, we love New York.
We weren't going to talk about that.
We weren't going to talk about that.
Oh, we have elephant in the room.
If you really want to talk about that.
It's the best thing I've seen since Dannon yogurt.
Agreed. This is a bit of a self-interested question, but as I hope many of you know, Milton passed away while we were putting up the Pushpin show at Poster House, which all of you contributed to in some way. Now that you've compiled all of that early work of Milton's into this book, do you think that he would have wanted us to incorporate or cut stuff from that show that would have had like better stuff that is in here now, or that we should have excluded?
I don't think so. I mean, before he passed away, for a couple of years before he passed away, and Sue would know this as well, he was working on a book for Taschen. And it was a big book. I mean, big in size and scope, but also in terms of concept. And it was his idea that everything led to something else. And he would take images that he made and connect them to other images and blow-ups. And he was always kind of fooling around with the alchemy of design. I mean, he was a true graphic alchemist. And I think that whatever way one would put his work together would be something that either he liked or didn't like, and it wasn't worth saying anything about. So, that's it.
I was going to say, building on what Steve was saying, the Pushpin show at Poster House was, focusing on, the big popular posters that Milton did. And I think that, one thing that's was such a lovely aspect of discovery in working on the book were all those years really more than 10 years of working as a designer before Milton even really did any of his posters, any of the posters that we know and associate with him in the mid to late 60s. So the Dylan poster was maybe his third or fourth, professional poster like of that size. And so, but in the preceding years, hundreds upon hundreds of, book covers and album covers, all sort of bringing him to that place. So, I think the posters were, the Pushpin show at Poster House was sort of arriving at Pushpin at its like peak, and then that earlier work is showing that progression.
Also, how did you guys curate what is in the book? Is this just the tip of the iceberg, or is this an exhaustive look at this period of his work?
Have you heard of the spaghetti theory?
Yes.
Well, there's a wall with a lot of stuff thrown on it. Mirko and Beth can talk more precisely about the choices that were made. There was just so much material that was so well executed. And at the same time, there were things in there that I wouldn't want to have in my house. So it was a matter of, for me, hands off. And they had to decide what was significant or not in the flow of everything. But we could have put together a 500-page volume. Mirko, you got a lot of the material. What did you choose to keep and hide?
I bought today, actually I won on auction in London today, a poster for Procol Harum Band, 1968, designed by Milton. Yeah, thank you.
Well,
And I never saw that poster before. And a week ago, I bought another poster, which I never saw before, from Milton. And kind of I'm discovering still some amazing things by Milton. And those two posters, they're amazing. And it's like never-ending story. Mm-hmm. Just when you think you got it. And we have somewhere here another witness of mine. I like witnesses.
I know.
Especially because court thing didn't work yesterday. Now I need to call witnesses today. Publisher, somewhere here is our publisher, Alan. Thank you. And I was, and he can testify. I was like, kind of like begging for extra pages constantly to get more, because I think we end up with like 400 and something pages book, and then they gave me 200 something, and I was like, but I have accent, I won. And, but there was at least 10 pieces which, and I'm crying inside, they are not in a book, but they have competition, I can always go there.
Well, speaking of that, what was the most surprising thing you guys found as you were building this book? Was there work you just absolutely hadn't seen before, going through the archive or going through what you found on eBay?
Beth?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I had seen everything that Milton Glaser had done, and I was wrong. I was really wrong. There was so much. And even, there was the work that Mirko uncovered, and even honestly, just work in the archive that, there's so much of it. So, it's described in catalog, but, I haven't laid eyes on some of that material for, 15 years. And then to, bring it out again and see it again. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that one person could do all this.
Luckily, he signed lots of his work, sometimes very small, but still signature, because sometimes people will tell me, oh, that's not Milton, and I will go, huh?
Do you think that your individual relationships with Milton shaped how you approached the book at all?
definitely. I think we decided to do it at a time when we were grieving. And also it was a time when the entire world was in pandemic stage. And Mirko actually spent a lot of time with him while he was ill. So there's this sense that I'll speak for Mirko because I'm sure you've had enough of hearing him.
No.
Mirko always said that, in not the same words, but he was carrying the torch for Milton. My feeling was we were creating a document that would, as Beth said, fill in the gaps, be the mortar that went between the bricks. I wanted to do him right, and that's why we became a team doing this. And everybody had a different relationship with him, but it comes out in the book.
And which parts of the book, how did you break down who was going to handle what parts and delineate that labor?
Well, I was going to write the essays. I'd written so much about both Seymour and Milton. Not that my word was the be-all and end-all, but I had a lot to work from and a lot of interviews. We realized that it would be primarily a visual book. So I thought, okay, I can write this and still have time to go to the beach. Beth did the captions. Mirko helped get information on that, but also Mirko was from dusk to dawn scouring the internet like a chat bot. In fact, I call him a Mirko bot, collecting all of these things that we've either seen and forgotten or haven't seen at all.
And you mentioned you started the book in the pandemic. How long did it take to put this together, like nose to tail?
I have no idea. I have no idea because I started to collect Milton work before I had book on mind. And because that was quite investment, I was thinking time to get money back. And that's how I come up with book. And I suggested book to Steve. I had some vague idea how book was supposed to look. And then we was shopping around for publisher for quite some time, unfortunately. And
then we found Alan, who we've adopted.
And Alan can be, again, my witness. I love witnesses, especially when my lawyers, they represent them. Anyway, I told him, if you're going to do a book, there is only one condition. I'm going to ask, whenever something is crucial, I'm going to ask myself question, will Milton like this? And if I conclude he will not like it, I'm not doing it. That was like kind of my condition. But after that, I think things just started to happen. You know, very organically. I had piles of materials and piles. And of course, there are some changes because suddenly something will appear and we'll need to move around and things like that. But it was enjoyment. It was pure enjoyment. It was like inside peek in somebody's life, secret life. That's why it's pink. This is Milton in closet.
And Beth was there in ground zero. You know, talk about your fascination and passion for the material.
I mean, I spend, every day looking at this stuff or interacting with it in some way or talking about it or working with students or designers or researchers who are interested in it. I remember when we were sort of working on this in earnest, and it was maybe the summer of 2020, and I was going into work a couple days, and I was the only one there on those days, and just by myself, blasting music, no vaccines, and just, going through all this work, scanning, and, so much material. And it was sad, but also therapeutic and exciting, and sort of a process of like rediscovering a lot of this material that I hadn't seen in a long time. I'd sort of forgotten about. It was a special experience, and it was during a terrible time. It was something that sort of could have only happened at that moment.
Also, when you get stuck on a person and their life, you try to uncover everything. I mean, I did a book on Paul Rand's sketches because I was given a whole box of stuff that was going to be thrown out. And Princeton Architectural Press was willing to do this book of just junk. But the junk kind of adds up to a narrative. And with Milton, one thing that I did that may be online, because I think I wrote about it, I keep files on a lot of people. And in the Milton file are these 11 by 17 legal pads, or whatever inch count they are, that Milton was sketching on during an AIGA board meeting. And he filled the entire pad. And he left it and put on his coat, and I took the pad, and he never found it again.
Do you guys see yourselves doing another book on a different part of Milton's career, or is this the last?
No, I think this is picture book. I'm dyslexic. I love picture books. Next one need to be pure writing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I can be part of that.
So the Milton bio.
Well, I'm not going to be doing a Milton bio. Devoting oneself to somebody else's life takes a lot out of you. I've done a professional bio of Rand, Paul Rand, of Alvin Lustig, a shortish one on Alex Steinweiss, and I'm working on something on Leo Leone right now. But you owe there's a great responsibility when you take on somebody's life. And it needs to be perfect, and I don't believe in perfection.
So one final question before I go to the final question, but why is there a Gloria Steinem quote in the back of the book?
Because Mirko knows Gloria Steinem. And Alan wanted a quote for the back of the book.
Really?
Yeah.
Also, Gloria Steinem was a friend of Milton's, and Ms. Magazine was a spin-off of New York Magazine, and that all occurred in his building on 32nd Street. So it's all connected.
My floor
Yes.
is actually where Miss Magazine started. And when I came in this country in '86, 25th of March, one of the first people who I spoke to, and I had telephone numbers of 2 people. One of them was Gloria Steinem. And Gloria had a little party. She invited me, and she asked me what she can do for me. And I, East European, working in the park in rain, no problem. I told her, I know you know this old guy, and I would like to meet him. And she, fortunately, was knowing at that time many old guys, but that one was Milton Glaser. And she called Milton Glaser for me and told him I would like to meet him.
So all of this is because of Gloria.
Yeah, behind every good
You
book
ask a
is,
question and you get a lot of
got it.
answers.
behind every big book is big woman.
Yes.
Here, in this case, literally.
Okay, so the final question is actually, what is your favorite Milton Glaser piece in this book? Bonus points if it's not actually in the book, but that you just put in the... Whose is this?
This is me. First of all, I'm a big fan of George Orwell, a huge fan of George Orwell. And I have a particular fondness for his dystopias, particularly 1984, which I always fantasized living through. And now we're here.
You're welcome.
And this was the edition that we read in, when I went to a boys' progressive school. No, it wasn't it was a regressive school.
Yeah.
But this was what we had to read, and I had no idea that a designer designed it or an illustrator did the lettering, but it was so refreshing as a cover for something that was so dour. The original cover, which I had seen, was just like a torn out piece of newsprint. And the paperback version was really tawdry. It was of a busty woman in a kind of sarong being looked at by Big Brother. That's how these books got sold.
Yeah, my grade school and your grade school were very
But
different.
I just love what he did with hand lettering, and this one says it all without saying a lot.
All right, whose is, ooh, that didn't work. Who's this one?
Me.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Stephen Brower is a great designer, but also his nephew.
You forgot your microphone.
No, sorry. Sorry, thank you very much.
You're
You're so kind. Stephen Brower is a great designer, but he's also nephew of Milton. And when I was looking for new work, I figured out family must have some early work somewhere, because they always keep somewhere under the carpet or something, just in case if you become famous. And I asked him, and he had quite a few things, and then he told me, and by the way, I know this lady to whose mother, Milton, when he was 12 years old, drew something on the end when they graduated from high school, draw in her whatever they call that book.
Your book.
Yearbook or something like that. And I was like, I must find that lady. Turned out that lady was living 3 blocks from my studio on 14th Street.
Waiting for you.
Really? That's creepy. Anyway, and she brought that book in, and I invited immediately Beth to interview her because I wanted record. And this is drawing which Milton did when he was 12 years old, obviously to fascinate this young girl. And it's a little bit like cave drawings. Like, we didn't improve much. Technique is slightly better, but pretty much we are still doing the same thing. And it's exactly the same thing with Milton. When you look how he signed his name, how this X2 is almost I love New York, like all these elements, he's repeating that drawing again and again and again. What I would like to point is for you, this here, he drew that before Thomas the Tank Engine was invented. He drew that 2 years before. It's just proof that old guys, they stole our best ideas. And because I'm gullible, I didn't choose one, I had 2.
Okay.
Can you show
Yeah,
me?
you have the,
No, you
I'm
press-
taking it back?
Yeah, it's fine.
There you go.
Okay. I choose this art because this art arrived,
But this isn't even in the book.
this not in the book, arrived 3 days later. 3 days after book went to print.
And I would have insisted it go in the book because I was a big Paul Revere and the Raiders fan.
And this is 1968. This is one of the posters I discovered later, or I know that poster exists, but I didn't have my hands on it. And I just missed that in a book. That's why I decided to have another piece here.
Thank you.
Does anybody remember the song Kicks?
Yes.
So start humming it.
Please don't.
All right. Oh, you picked this one?
I did.
It's a great one.
So this is from the same year as the Polar Revere and the Raiders poster, 1968 also. This is not a particularly obscure Milton Glaser poster, but it is fantastic. And like many Glaser works, it contains an allusion to an object of art history, in this case a Renaissance painting, of this satyr mourning over the death of a nymph. And it's nice to know that if you do, but you don't have to. And I think one of the great things about Milton's work is, there are all these kind of like fun, references to art you may or may not be familiar with, but it doesn't matter. If you don't know it, you can still love this poster. So what this poster does is it cuts off the figures of the painting, and it just leaves the dog of the painting, who is actually in the background of the painting. But here, the dog is in the foreground. It's this beautiful drawing. It's very kind of all the emotional weight of what was in the painting is now transferred to the dog in this poster. And this is a poster for Olivetti, the typewriter company, and it's advertising a typewriter of all things. So you have this incredible, kind of very like sensitive, sad dog, and who's trying to sell you a typewriter. So it's kind of bananas that this got made. But that's what happens when you have a client who's very much open to, creative ideas, and you have someone like Milton Glaser who, has an ample supply of them. I could just look at this forever.
Sorry, sir.
I was going to say, this is why we called the book Pop, not the cover of the book. What he did for things like Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test and Hugh Masekela and Dylan, these are the things that are of the time. But that's a piece of pop. It's without the pretense of the art. Mm-hmm. So we didn't call it pop art. We just call it pop because it pops.
And about that, you know what is favorite part to Milton from this poster? Blue color of the river. He told me, this works so perfectly. Look how nice that color is popping out. And that was the most fascinating part to him about this poster. The rest, he didn't care. I'm most honestly, he was like, look at that blue color.
It's a good blue. All right, we have time for somebody's going to give me a signal when we run out of time. You're going to give me a signal when we run out of time. But we have time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I have to repeat them if the mic doesn't work, so speak up.
Hi, everyone.
Dallas.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So the way this will work is you just raise your hand. We'll probably fit in about maybe 3 to 4 questions. And I saw someone with their hand right up, so I'm happy to come over, and we'll start with you.
Hi. What was Milton's favorite work of his own? What do you think it would be?
You must decide to whom you're asking.
All of you, each of you.
I think his most favorite work was not a piece of design. I think it was education and what he was able to do as an educator later in his life. He liked a lot of his things. Beth can probably address this more precisely, but I think it was the thinking that became a hallmark of his career that he was most proud of.
All right.
I think Milton was in the same time demanding and extremely modest. Like it was a strange combination. And I'm going to tell you one story you didn't ask about. That way, next time whoever asks question is going to be punished with long answer. He got major award, and I was his wingman because I will put him in a cab, take him there, bring him back. He was already old and whatever. And I asked him, we are going, to pick a award or whatever. He said, I'm not going. I said, why are you not going? It's a major award. And he said to me, listen, they're going to serve bad food. Yeah. They're going to be people to whom I don't have nothing to say. And I can die 2 hours later, and that is the last thing I did. He went home, had pasta and vino with his wife.
Good story.
It's a good story.
You had said that Milton was throwing away some of his sketches, like very carelessly. Do you think that it is because it wasn't something that he envisioned, or was it lack of confidence? Why do you think he was so careless with some of his sketches?
I think that's just because they were projects he thought he didn't think highly of, and particularly from work, if it was work from this period, it was just work that was not a reflection of what he valued, currently in what he was doing at the time. Yeah, I mean, he could be very dismissive of a lot of his work, and he wasn't precious about it. So if he was over it, he was over it. He was on to the next thing.
He didn't look ahead at, it's the way he worked with Beth in the archive. He didn't really look ahead as the narrative continues, the way some people are so precious about what they've done, that they keep every sketch, every doodle, and very often those doodles and sketches become valuable because of the personality behind them. But it's like the pad of paper that I snuck into my bag. He wasn't really going to come back for it and take it and put it in a vault.
I'm going to tell you inside of this story, day when I became friend with Milton Glaser, real friend. I walked in his office. We was doing something else together. I was not yet in the building, and there was drawings everywhere, and there was packing drawings. Milton was preparing big show Piero della Francesca in Italy, and there was packing, preparing. And me being me, I'm going around and checking out everything. And of course, Milton was following me from far. He was on the telephone doing seven things like always in the same time, but also checking out what I'm doing. When I came back to him, he said, what do you think? I said, it's great. And he said, what do you think? And I said, no, it's amazing, except that drawing there seems like you kind of didn't know whatever, and that drawing there, and he looked at me again, pulling back, and he said, you are like my wife. She didn't like those 2 drawings too. And he said, can you remove those 2 drawings? And those 2 drawings didn't go to show. Just like that. What can I tell you?
Any other questions? I can see one all the way over here. Yes.
So in 40 or 50 or 100 years, when other historians write about Milton, will they see him primarily as a conceptual illustrator or designer, or both?
I wish I could see into the future. I'd make some good investments. I think, this is one of those very interesting speculative questions. If enough people, scholars, write about him, they will determine the way he will be remembered. Or they will determine that as an art form, what used to be called commercial art and now is called narrative art, thanks in part to George Lucas opening up his museum in 2 years, will have more cultural value. And of course, with cultural value comes monetary value. And there are things that Milton did that are just there to be there. His poster for the Catskills. I don't like cats, so don't anybody ever talk to me about a cat. But I love this poster of this cat of his that was just kind of luxuriating in the fact that he belonged to an artist and got fed twice a day. And you look at that and it doesn't have, it's advertising the Catskill Mountains, but it doesn't have to. It's just an image with some lettering on it. It stands on its own. So I think Milton's work will, at this point, can stand on its own. And as people study him more through the archive or through other means, his importance will be determined.
In 300 years, somebody gonna probably do a movie about New York in this period of time, and in that movie, they're gonna need to have somebody with plastic bag, I love New York, to be authentic.
It'll be an AI movie.
All right, we have time for one more question, but we'll close this out and I'll tell you more.
So in Milton Glaser's class at SVA, everybody got a B. Was there anybody that ever got an A? Do you know of any of that? I'm dying to know.
When he gave up his famous workshop.
Sarah got an A.
Yeah, when he gave up his very well-known workshop, he came to work at the program I co-chair with Lita Tellerico called MFA Design, Designer as Entrepreneur. And it was at that point that he decided to give everybody A's. Sorry, Sue.
Okay, well, I will join us on stage. One round of applause for our incredible panelists.
And we want to thank Angelina for doing this. She's a great moderator.
So thank you all for joining us tonight, and thanks for everyone coming out in person. AIJ New York is here to serve you, and as mentioned, you can learn more about us at aijnewyork.org. Now, please join us for a brief reception courtesy of Brooklyn Brewery, a famous client of the famous Milton Glaser, and a book signing. So for those of you who did not get to ask your questions, please find our panelists in the book signing and join us out there. Have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.